Okay.
This is Naiknalli village in Kanakpura taluk of Bangalore district, Karnataka, where we had taken up watershed development, the Kabal Nala, and we had some crop grown on contour and not on contour. This was a plot where ragi was taken up, which was not on contour, and the germination has totally failed, as you can see in this field, and later the farmer has taken up horse gram, whereas at the same time in the adjacent block where the ragi was taken up on contour, the crop stand is much better and much even. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಗಿ ಯಾಕೆ ಬರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಾ? ರಾಗಿ ಮೊದಲು ರಾಗಿ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರಲ್ವಾ ಆಗಸ್ಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ, ರಾಗಿ ಯಾಕೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಹುಟ್ಟಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಾ? ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬೇರೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
ನೀವು ಸಮಪಾತಳದಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರಿಂದ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಅಂತ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸಮಪಾತಳಲ್ಲಿ
ನೀರು ತಡೆಗಟ್ಟಿದೆ, ಅದರಿಂದ ಅದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ತದೆ. ಇದು ಆ ಥರ ಕೊಡಲಿಲ್ಲ, ನೀರು ಹೊಂಟೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ, ಶೀತ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಆದ್ರಿಂದ ಅದು ಉಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಲ್ಲ.
ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಸೇಸ್ ಈಸ್, since this plot was in poor soil compared to that, the germination was poor, and more than that, once the germination was there, because of the contour sowing there, the water retention was much better and it could withstand a drought for a longer period than this crop. And this crop totally wilted, and he had no other go but to go in for an alternate crop of horse gram in this plot, because he had not taken up the sowing on contour here, whereas people on the other side of the road had taken up contour sowing, and hence the crop was much better there. You want something else?
Now, is he convinced as a farmer that the right thing to do would be to be on the contour for this type of farming?
ಈಗಲಾದರೂ ನಿಮಗೆ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸಮಪಾತಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡುವುದು ಅದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಓಟಕ್ಕೆ on contour or taking up planting on contour is much better than going along the slope, and he is convinced that, and he says that from now onwards in the coming years he is going to take up sowing on contour.
Now, he has lost his Kharif crop. He lost his Kharif crop.
Yeah, he has lost his Kharif crop.
And over the road the Kharif crop is still growing.
Yeah.
So they will get something from their Kharif crop. Now, to try and tide him over, he has planted this horse gram. But he will not get much money from the horse gram.
Yeah, this is only
a catch crop.
Yeah.
So he lost out completely, and all the other farmers that were not on the contour, they lost their crops.
And you want me to narrate some of that?
Yeah.
I mean, since he could not catch or retain the moisture, and has lost the entire Kharif crop of ragi, as a catch crop he had to go in for horse gram, wherein he is losing a lot of financially he is losing a lot. And
Yeah.
Whereas the other farmers, just because there was a little change in management, in the sense they had gone on contour, could retain the crop, Kharif crop, and they are doing much better than the farmer who had not done it on contour.
Now, these farmers that went on the contour, it didn't cost them any extra. They just changed their management.
Little management.
A change of management. From along the slope,
Yeah.
to change the management to plow on the contour and plant on the contour. They got a crop, these people did not.
Yeah.
And that's the whole basis of the moisture conservation situation. Now, what was the rainfall? The rainfall when this crop of ragi was planted, how much rainfall did they get?
8 millimeters.
8 millimeters.
In the first week of August.
And then?
Then there was no rainfall for almost 6 weeks. The next rainfall received was on the 24th of September.
Uh-huh.
We received about 20,
and this was enough to kill the ragi crop?
Yeah, ragi crop which was not on contour.
Yeah. But this crop over the road received exactly the same amount.
The same.
But it survived because of the good rainfall.
Contour, and there was some retention of moisture.
Yeah. So really, for no extra price, but planting on the contour, these farmers that planted on the contour saved their crops.
There was no extra cost, in fact.
Yeah.
It was only a little change in the management practice.
Yes. Now, can you explain that to the farmer and see if he understands the difference? This is the farmer who lost his crop in the drought.
ನೋಡಿ, ಬರೀ ಯಾವುದೇ ಥರದ ಒಂದು ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನ ನಿಮಗೆ ಬರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ರಾಗಿ ಬೆಳೆ, ಈಗ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಮಳೆಗಾಲದ ರಾಗಿ ಬೆಳೆ ಪೂರ್ತಿಯಾಗಿ ಹೋಯಿತು, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹುರುಳಿ ಬೆಳಿಬೇಕಾಯ್ತು, ಅದರಿಂದ ಭಾಳಷ್ಟು ಲಾಸ್ ಆಯ್ತು ತಾನೆ. ಅಲ್ಲ, ನಿಮ್ಗೀಗ ನಾವು ಗೊಬ್ಬರ ಹಾಕೋದಾಗಲಿ ಇದಾಗಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ಥರದಾದ ಒಂದು ನಿಮಗೂ ಅವ್ರಿಗೂ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಏನು ಇದು ಮಾಡಿರೋದು ಬರೀ ಕಾಂಟೂರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿರೋದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಅದರಿಂದಾಗಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಗೆ ಖರ್ಚು ಏನಿಲ್ಲ ನಿಮಗೆ. ಆದ್ರೂ ಅವ್ರು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಬೆಳೆ ತೆಗಿಬೋದಾಯ್ತು, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಳೆ ಇಲ್ಲ.
And what does he say?
He accepts that without any much extra cost, say something like putting more fertilizer or doing some other management practices wherein the cost incurred will be more. Without anything, just because they had taken up it on contour, they could get a better crop of Kharif, whereas he has lost out and he had to go in for horse gram, which is financially much
Poorer.
lower than the other crop.
So now, do you think, is he quite convinced that the right thing to do would be to go onto the contour?
As he himself says, he is very much convinced that, and he will be taking up contour sowing from the next year or from the next season.
Now, if we gave him a contour guideline with cuss, so that he could plant his crops in the future on the contour, would he do that?
ಈಗ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೇವಲ್ಲ ಕಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಗೆ ಒಂದು ಇದನ್ನ ಹಾಕೊಟ್ರೆ ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. He says if he is given a key line on the contour,
Yeah.
From some vegetative or some guideline, he is going to take it up on contour itself.
That's very good. Okay.
In time as that cowpea,
Yeah.
because the horse gram was sown later.
Yeah.
Even this farm maize and red gram, which was taken up almost simultaneously, has suffered here, whereas it's much better where the moisture retention was there.
Absolutely. Now you can see, even in this droughted field where a little bit of moisture has accumulated along a field bund, but it's only a very small patch,
Yeah.
and that's the only crop that these people got. And that was only because a little bit of moisture accumulated in that area there of cowpea, and you can see very scattered
For the maize.
fodder maize. Now the farmer has had to go and plant the whole area in horse gram to get some crop at this stage. Now the thing there is that bund saved a little bit of moisture against the bund itself, but it didn't hold the moisture in the field, because the field was not ploughed on the contour. This particular field here was ploughed a little bit across the slope, but the water's run down to the end,
Along the lines.
along the lines, and then it's gone out through there. It's broken.
Almost there's a gully that has been formed in the next field.
That's right. Now this was just from these last rains. How much rain have they had this last month?
Last 15 days we had received about 106 millimeters of rain here.
And that 106 millimeters of rain has all run off
Yeah.
from this field, and we'll take a closer look at that, because this is the whole trouble with this system of earth bunds. They're not on the contour, and the soil moisture is being lost. Down there you can see where the soil moisture has all accumulated in the corner of the field, and the crop has been deprived of that soil moisture. And this is a system that is going on throughout the rain-fed areas of India, isn't it?
Yeah.
The moisture is not being kept where the crop can use it. It's being run straight off the crop and kept in the corner of the field. Now, if you don't get the normal, reasonable rainfalls, you end up with no crop at all, and then we declare that a drought. Whereas, in fact, we haven't really had a drought. We've had bad distribution of moisture in the field, and we've got to have better management of this field moisture. And the only way we're going to do that is by showing the farmers how to plough on the contour. And when we look across the road, we can see the effect of farmers ploughing on the contour in this other field, which we will go and look at and have a better, closer look at the residue of the Kharif crop that failed in the drought here. Now this is all the raggy that is left in this farmer's field from his Kharif planting, and the reason that this raggy is in this little corner, and it's not going to produce any crop, it's quite useless, it's finished, but there are raggy plants growing there, as you can see, and the only reason they're growing there is because all the water ran off this field in the little bit of rain they had and accumulated in this corner. 106 millimeters of rainfall, and this rainfall has run through the farmer's horse gram and right across the field here, because there's been no attempt made at moisture conservation with the way the farmer has ploughed, and we'll follow the course of this runoff. You can see this runoff here, accumulated, and then it's broken through down here, and let's walk down with it. And now we've got a little gully forming already, just from 105 millimeters of rainfall, and it's come to the bund, the useless bund that's costing the government a fortune to put these bunds in. It's broken right through that bund because the bund has no structural strength to withhold this runoff. And now it's run through this field here. This is just one rainstorm. It's broken the bund here and it's run through. Now this water has been lost to the crops. It's run down there, it's taken all the topsoil with it. Now if this had been a cuss line or a cuss vegetative barrier, this would not have happened. And if these crops had been planted on the contour, in contour furrows, this water couldn't have accumulated down the bottom of the field in one major stream such as it has done here. This is not drought-proofing agriculture. This sort of farming is going to show continual recurring droughts if the water is run off the soil in an uncontrolled fashion like this. Now you can see these crops have failed, even though there's been good rain in the last couple of weeks. The water has just run straight off, and it's running straight and away from the crop. All the rain that's fallen in this area, these farmers don't understand how to plow and plant on the contour. All the rainfall that they needed now for their rabi crop has been lost. And here is their rabi crop, a horse gram, and the remains of their Kharif crop. And ultimately, out of both the Kharif and the rabi crop this year, these farmers are going to get nothing. Now this can be termed a drought. But in fact, in reality, it is not a drought. What has happened is that the water has not been retained in these areas because the farmers have not been ploughing and planting on the contour. And in a heavy storm, the bunds, as we have seen, cannot stop this runoff from running away from the farm, and has also broken the bund. Now, if we had cuss contour guidelines and we had planted these crops on the contour so that we could conserve the moisture in each and every one of these small furrows, we would have had a good crop, as we will see across the road where we've practiced this. These farmers doing this sort of agriculture are going to suffer the same problems every time the rain is badly distributed. They're going to end up with a drought. No crop at all. Here you can see where the water has run off the end of the farm and into a bit of a depression where it's been absorbed because of the dry conditions and is completely lost to the farmer. It's gone. Moisture from the rains has accumulated because of this strange system of bunding, has accumulated in one corner of the field where it's no use to the crop whatsoever. Let's go and have a look at the same situation, and you can see that the crop has not been planted on the contour. You can see where the water has run off bed areas in India, that unless the crops are planted on the contour, you're going to end up with the same situation that these farmers find themselves in. Poor rainfall distribution, no means of keeping the moisture in the soil for the crop, and you end up with a situation like this. Even though they've had good rains in the last 2 weeks, 105 millimeters, it's too late. But you can see what happened to the rains, even the recent rains. They've run off this farm, they've taken the soil with them. You can see the real erosion there. The so-called soil conservation measures that have been touted throughout the country, the bunds, all they've done is arrested the water at the bottom of the field where it's no longer any use to the crop, and they've also held up a bit of silt. Let's go and have a look at that more closely. This is the sort of thing we're against. You can see here the bund system of so-called soil conservation, so-called moisture conservation, is not the right approach. You can see all the water that has come, all the rainfall that has fallen in the last few days, too late for these farmers, for the drought, has all accumulated in the corner of this field, where it's of no value to the crop. You can see the rest of the field. You can see the runoff rills. You can see the horse gram is not thriving under these conditions, even though the rainfall has been good recently. Have a look at these crops that were planted by this project on the contour. These crops have gone through exactly the same stress of rainfall.
ಜಮೀನು ನಿಮ್ದೇನಾ? ಕಡಲೆಕಾಯಿ ಯಾವಾಗ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದಪ್ಪ ಇದು? ಆಗಸ್ಟ್ ತಿಂಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಮೊದಲನೇ ವಾರದಲ್ಲೇ. This groundnut was sown during first week of August.
At the same time as that raggy across the road?
Yeah, same time as ragi that was
across the road.
Across the road, yeah.
Now the ragi crop has been ploughed out. The ragi crop was pulled out and they had to put the horse gram, but this has survived.
ಅಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಗಿ ಇದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ಹಾಳಾಗಿ ಅವರು ಹುರುಳಿ ಚೆಲ್ಲಬೇಕಾಯ್ತು. ಆದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿದಂಥ ಬೆಳೆಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾರಣ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಗೊತ್ತಾ ಏನಾದರೂ?
There's the line of cuss.
ಈ ಕಸ್ಸು ಇದು ಹಾಕಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಇದ್ರ ಸಮಪಾತಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಏನಾದರೂ ಒಳ್ಳೇದಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತೀರಾ? ಅದರಿಂದಾಗಿ ಇದು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಉಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತು ಅಂತೇಳಿ.
You can see the stress this groundnut's been under, but it's survived because the contour. There's the red gram line in between.
ಇನ್ಯಾರಾದರೂ ಫಾರ್ಮರ್
What does he think, even though he is working here, what does he think of this system compared to over the road? He is an old resident in this area?
Yeah, he's a resident.
Yeah.
And only a worker. The owner of the plot is different.
Yeah. What does he think, though, as a worker?
He is convinced that because of the cusp key line given and the sowing taken up along that key line, along the contour, the moisture retention was better, and that's why the crop stand is much better here compared to the ragi that was sown across the road.
So this shows you the difference between moisture conservation on the contour and across the road that we've just been looking at was no attempt at moisture conservation, but the bunds around the boundaries and all the moisture being kept in one corner. This is an even crop, even though you've had a very bad season. This contour key line of cuss is going to be here. Now it's established, it will be here it'll be a permanent mark for the farmers to follow the contour with their ploughing and their planting. And despite the very bad early dry conditions, this crop has survived purely and simply because of moisture conservation in situ on the contour. That other moisture conservation was not in situ. That was beside the bund. This moisture has all been held in the furrows where the crop can use it. And to compare the two areas, you wouldn't believe they were in the same locality. This is an even crop, and the red gram and the groundnuts are looking well. The cuss is doing very well because the moisture was held in situ in the furrows, and the whole crop benefited. This moisture did not run off to the edge of the field. What does the worker think then? Is he convinced that this is the operation that should be done? As far as he knows, did it cost any more money to do this than do that? Unfortunately, this film was made at short notice.
He says there is no extra cost involved.
No extra cost involved.
No extra cost involved.
Why don't these other farmers do the same then? If there's no extra cost, what does he think?
ಅವ್ರು ಯಾಕೆ ಆ ಕಡೆನಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಥರದಲ್ಲೇ ಸಮಪಾತಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾಕೆ ಮಾಡಲಿಲ್ಲ? ಅವರಿಗೆ ಕಸ್ ಕೀ ಲೈನ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದನೇ. He says just because the cusp key line was not given to them on the other side of the road, and also they were not much convinced, they did not take up contour sowing. And as I already explained to the other farmer, he will also be taking up contour sowing from the next year as he has seen it with his own eyes.
Yeah.
The contrast between the contour sowing and crop taken up non-contour.
Now the big thing here is that this is a simple technology and it doesn't cost the farmer anything. So it doesn't cost the government anything, it doesn't cost the country anything. But you can see the difference in response because of moisture conservation. You wouldn't believe that these two fields are only separated by about 30 meters. And they're on the same soils, they're under exactly the same rainfall regime. But this field has been planted on the contour with contour guideline for the farmer and a permanent guideline which will also act as a soil conservation barrier, a vegetative barrier to prevent any major soil erosion if they get a heavy storm. And they have conserved all their moisture in situ. And this is what has resulted in under these conditions, a very good crop of groundnuts and red gram at no extra cost to the farmer. I think that's convincing enough. Has it convinced our man here?
He is convinced.
He's convinced. You're convinced?
I am definitely, when I am taking up the program.
Yeah. I think it's rain-fed areas in the rest of the other states of India. This should be the system they should follow.
Yeah, this is basically the first thing that has to be followed is contour sowing.
Yeah.
With some structures to retain moisture.
Which in this case were the furrows on the contour, where we had the in situ moisture. The moisture stayed in those furrows and soaked into the ground, rather than ran off as we saw in the other field. I think that's very important.
Vegetative edges give a key line to the farmer which he can follow year after year.
That's
so
right.
There's no need for the extension worker to stand there every year or every season.
And these will be permanent. So once the work is done by you, you can move on to another area and forget about this. These farmers can carry on their own from there on out.
Once
And
they have a tree line, they can do it on their own.
That's
There's
right.
no need for the extension worker to be there every year.
No, that's right. You can leave it. Now the farmer can do it himself. And this contour guideline here of CAS, Vetiver resinoides, will be permanent and will remain as a permanent barrier to soil erosion. The silt will build up behind this, and ultimately over the years this will form natural terraces. Let's go and have a look further. Wherever we look in this field, you can see we've got good even growth. And this was probably one of the worst Kharif droughts you've had in a long time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because in the Kharif, what was the rainfall pattern again? When this was planted when?
August, first week.
First week of August, and then what happened after that was planted?
The first week when the initial rains that was received was only 8 millimeters during sowing. And after that there was a drought for about 6 weeks.
So this withstood the 6-week drought?
Yeah, next rainfall we received was only on the 24th of September.
And you always considered that ragi was better than groundnuts to withstand drought?
But with our own experience we can see that the crop stand is much better with groundnut compared to ragi.
Yeah. But this is because of the moisture conservation in situ. Without that moisture conservation, these groundnuts would have died.
Died long back.
Yep. Then the paddock across the road that we looked at, which is similar to all the other areas that failed, then why don't the farmers do this? Why don't the government come out with this as a policy?
ಆಚೆ ಹೋಗೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಈ ಪ್ರತಿ ವರ್ಷ ಈ ಮಣ್ಣಿನ ಬದುಗಳು ಏನು ಒಡೆಯೋದು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇರ್ತದೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ನೀವು ಪ್ರತಿ ವರ್ಷ ಹಾಕೋದು ಆ ಥರದ ತೊಂದರೆಗಳು ಯಾವುದೂ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಈ ವರ್ಷನೇ ನೀವು ಬೆಳೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರಲ್ಲೇ ಒಪ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಇನ್ನೂ ಒಂದು 2 ವರ್ಷ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಭಾಳ ನಿಮಗೆ ನಂಬಿಕೆ ಬರ್ತದೆ. ಅದರಿಂದಾಗಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು 2 ವರ್ಷ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೈತರು ಇಲ್ಲಿರೋವಂಥವ್ರು ಅದನ್ನು ಉತ್ತು ಹಾಳು ಮಾಡಿದಾಗೆ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜವಾಬ್ದಾರಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ.
ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀವಿ.
He believes
he believes in it, and he accepts the responsibility to see that for the next couple of years these cust lines are not plowed by the farmers, so that they are going to see the benefits for the next couple of seasons and convince themselves.
Well, that's very good.